Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to the Thinking Out Loud podcast. Today we're back at it with Professor Robert Pape to talk about, what happened recently in Iran and the U.S. bombing of Iran and the killing of the supreme leader. And I thought it would be interesting to bring Robert Pape back onto the podcast because he has deep expertise in Air Force strikes and really deep expertise on how countries can react, and has been talking about the U.S. attacking Iran and escalations in Iran for a few months now. So, Professor, you want to introduce yourself really briefly and just go over, some your first thoughts that you have on the issue.
That's great. Eduardo, it's really great to be here with you. I always enjoy our conversations, as you know, from our class podcast. So just so the listeners know, I am a professor at the University of Chicago. I got my PhD at Chicago in the 1980s. My PhD was on coercive air power. Then the Cold War ended, and right away we got involved in a whole lot of air campaigns, including the 1991 Gulf War. So for over 30 years now, I have been writing about coercive air power. I have been commenting on each and every air campaign since 1991 extensively. Think not hundreds, but thousands of interviews, really quite
Right.
a few. And I taught for the U.S. Air Force for 3 years, conventional targeting strategy. I published Bombing to Win, which looks at every air campaign since World War I. And then I have published in Foreign Affairs on every air campaign that was not in Bombing to Win, so including last summer's air attack against Iran. So I have been teaching in my class strategy the bombing of Iran as the last 90 minutes of the course. So we have a whole day, 90 minutes on the hypothetical bombing Iran. I started doing this in 2005, so 20 years of hypothetical bombing of Iran through all the changes and coming of Fordo and the Moab and et cetera, et cetera. And we are basically right on track, by the way. So and there's really not been a surprise. I know the world might feel like there's been a surprise. Now, the big thing to tell you is that President Trump is up against the weight of history. He's not just up against Iran. He's up against the weight of history right now.
What do you
For,
mean?
for over a century, states, including the United States, states have been trying to topple governments with air power alone. And just think how magical that would be if you could really do that with air power alone. And then recently, in the last 30 years, I say recently, in the last 30 years, we have the precision air power hammer, which means we have almost 100% tactical success over and over and over again in our air campaigns. So we are not in a position anymore where we have to wonder, can the bombs destroy the targets? In fact, it would have been stunning had we missed the target, had we not killed the supreme leader, since that was so clearly on Trump's mind now for weeks in the opening day. In fact, in today's New York Times, just as I would have expected, Israeli intelligence, probably human, had the supreme leader in its sights, probably had a human being with eyeballs on the supreme leader. That's what led to the go. And that's why he can't really answer, the White House can't really answer what was the trigger for the cause of this. It was because we thought we could kill the leader with probably over 95% certainty. And that has been a common way we have begun precision air campaigns in the past. Now, in that whole period of time, over 100 years, air power alone has never, and I'm choosing my words carefully here, never toppled a regime. That's really quite stunning. You're talking about dozens and dozens of examples, and I'm sure we're probably going to cover quite a few of them here in this conversation. And air power has been tried in dumb bomb age, in the precision age, hitting a whole lot of targets, hitting just a few targets. So we tried many, many, many sophisticated different ways to skin this cat. And the fact of the matter is, it is a record that has zero wins, not just a few wins. And that's why nobody can give you an example of a win. Okay. And that's been going on now for days, all over social media, all over the news. Nobody
So,
has a good example.
so what you're saying is that if the U.S. wants to actually, pursue regime change in Iran, we're going to need boots on the ground, basically.
That will come to that. That's like
Right.
stage three,
What's
Eduardo.
so what's stage
Okay,
what's
so
stage
we
two in
need to
between?
understand first that what is happening to us before we get to these more dire scenarios. We are now losing control. That's the critical thing to understand. You see, with our great power in the United States, the world's leading economy, world's most powerful military, with the precision age, with 100% confidence virtually in destroying targets tactically, we have what I call the illusion of control. It looks like we are in control. And listen to President Trump and J.D. Vance. They talk, just President Trump in the last 24 hours. Well, he's got off ramps. He may do this. He may do that as if it's under his control. J.D. Vance, oh, we'll never get into anything protracted as if that is in his control. This is the real problem with the smart bomb trap. Now, the smart bomb trap, I have laid this out on this new Substack called the escalation trap. And the smart bomb trap, I have many articles on this just in the last week because I could see this all coming, Eduardo. So I decided to start this then. And this lays out frameworks, not just simply opinion and not just simply commentary, but puts this in a framework. You see, the smart bomb trap in stage one, you have the hyper accuracy of the precision revolution. And that leads in stage one to the bombing because you have high confidence you're going to destroy all the targets. But what that does is it changes the politics of the situation. I didn't say the military, I said the politics of the situation. When you bomb to decapitate leaders, kill them, to take down the regime, as President Trump has announced, what that is doing is not just putting a bomb on a target, not just cratering dirt or concrete, but it is announcing that you want the new government to obey America. Now, you can say this is an opportunity for freedom to flourish, but notice this is up to President Trump, and everybody understands that. What is occurring now is the politics inside the regime, the remainder of the regime, which is 99% plus, and also the society are now infused with nationalism. I don't mean religion, I mean Iran first. Even
Right.
the pro-democracy movement now, they may well want to get rid of the government. This government may well be evil. But that's not the same thing as, sure, we're going to obey President Trump and we're going to obey Washington, what they want. And this is now changing politics inside. And this is happening where we now, with the leadership decapitation we've done, and we have killed the supreme leader, that is for sure.
Mm,
And we've probably killed 30 to 40 other leaders. This is a drop in the bucket on this giant country. This is not Libya when we first had the first, we'll probably talk about this, April
right.
1986. We tried the very first raid with precision weapons, and the precision age was to decapitate Muammar Gaddafi in Libya.
That didn't work out.
Now, Libya at the time was 4 million. Okay.
Uh-huh.
This is 92 million. There are thousands of political leaders here in this regime. There's over 1 million in arms as actual. The Baji, which is the force that just slaughtered somewhere between 3 and 30,000 protesters here,
Hmm.
has plenty of weapons to do this again. 1 in 8 Iranian adults is on the payroll of the Iranian government. One in
Wow.
eight. Think
Hmm.
about that for a moment.
That's a
Now,
big, a big
taking
statement.
down this government here, This is just a tiny drop in the bucket, which is why already you see that the Iranian government is announcing, well, we're perfectly expecting you. This is to be expected in the precision age. They know they're going to die. They
Hmm.
want to go down as heroes for their beliefs and their country, and that is
So
what they're doing.
right. So, 2 months ago we had a conversation on Venezuela, and basically what we talked about was that Venezuela, as of that point, was going to be kind of like a puppet state of the United States, and that's not been really different from what we've actually seen from these past few months. So that's not
Well,
what you
I
think
would
is going to
disagree with you,
happen.
Eduardo. I think what happened is the Trump administration has quietly pulled back.
Right,
So
right.
you
But what I'm
remember
saying is
what
like
the
there's
whole
not
idea
been
here,
an
just to go
aggressive
back to
position.
Venezuela, the whole
Right.
idea here wasn't just to take Maduro out, not just replace Maduro with somebody else. The whole idea was this was supposed to create a new paradise of oil that was going to suddenly, we're going to have all these oil companies going in, and we're going to sort of dramatically changed the last 20 years of oil production inside
Right,
of
right.
Venezuela. Well, as I was explaining, that was always a pipe dream. It was a pipe
Hmm.
dream because there's an enormous amount of this country, Venezuela, is prime for resistance if, in fact, there is an imperial inquest. And what you saw with the Trump administration is they actually brought in the oil companies to the White House, and the oil companies told them to their face on
That they don't want to
television,
do it. Yeah.
we're not doing it. And you know why they're
Right.
not doing it? They don't want to die. They want a paycheck, not a bullet, as I was explaining. And what is the Trump administration going to do? They basically walked away. Okay,
Right.
so
Right.
this is not a case of regime change in any meaningful way. They're not as long as there's
No, I
nothing here
understand. I'm
for
just
the
saying,
regime to do.
but
So you saw them
mhm.
abandon course, basically,
Right.
Eduardo. This is not a victory for Trump. This is him conceding.
Right. But in the case of Iran, then you say there's going to be fiercer resistance because for the case of Venezuela, basically the entire population hated Maduro, and there wasn't really a strong sentiment against the attack in the immediate aftermath of the attack, at least. How do you see Iran, like the Iranians reacting to how that's going to happen? You see an escalation?
President Trump now is on the horns of a dilemma that's much more severe than Venezuela because he's now in stage two of the smart bomb trap with Iran. So this smart bomb trap has three stages. So what happened is in June, when Trump bombed Fordo, that was stage one. Stage one is you do precision strikes, you do it against a target. They are 100% tactically successful, as I've been saying for years, what exactly happened. But then the consequence is strategic uncertainty, if not failure, because the goal wasn't to put PGMs to dig craters in dirt and concrete in Fordo. The goal was to destroy the enriched uranium. And we know that before the strike on Fordo, there were 408 kilograms, that's 1,000 pounds, of 60% enriched uranium, enough for 10 nuclear bombs. 10. We also know with the other 20% and 5%, there was enough for another six nuclear bombs. And the bottom line is we have no idea where a single ounce of any of that enriched uranium is. And as I've been saying in my class forever, this was going to be the problem. And the problem here is that Iran was never going to let the IAEA back in to inspect. They're not going to turn over everything to the Americans, as I don't know who was thinking that. But now that's stage one. So what happened in this intervening 8 months is that we've basically become obsessed with the uncertainty. So we are now, since we have no idea, and 8 months has gone by, and there are literally hundreds and hundreds, including in the mountains, where this enriched uranium could be further enriched and could be fashioned into bombs. And we have no idea where all those sites could possibly be. We are now really obsessing about, are they actually on the road to a nuclear weapon? And you heard President Trump say that in so many words. That was always going to be the case. And that means stage two, where we are today, was always coming, which is regime change effort. So there's, as I've said to my class, the way you were going to get regime change in Iran as a real operation by the United States is it would always start through Fordo. It would always come about a year after the Fordo attack, and it would come because of the uncertainty of the enriched uranium. And that is now where we are at stage two. So President Trump now is now stage two of the smart bomb trap, where he's being pulled now into escalation because Iran has retaliated. They're retaliating against
Right.
seven countries, not just Israel.
Right. We had a bomb in Kuwait. We had three Americans killed in that.
Yeah, but it's seven countries, including a
Hmm.
hotel in Dubai,
Yeah.
civilians
Hmm.
killed there. And why are they doing that? Because they are playing the strategy of the weak. You see, Eduardo, since Vietnam, the states that we've been up against, who are all weaker than us, the smart ones all adopt the strategy of the weak, which is they don't go toe to toe with us on conventional battles because they can't beat us on conventional battles. What they do is they play for the protracted war and they try to defeat us politically in the United States. And that's
Right.
what
Hmm.
happened with Lyndon Johnson. Lyndon Johnson in 1960, we lost the Vietnam War as a war without ever losing a battle, ever losing a battle.
Right.
Where we lost it was not on the battlefields of Vietnam. We lost it in public opinion in the United States when it became a protracted forever war. That happened with the Tet Offensive, 1967. A lot of details there, but bottom line is President Johnson stepped down from running for re-election, and then the Democrats totally flubbed in 68. And who walked in? The Republicans. That was the
Right.
Vietnam That's how the North Vietnamese beat us. They beat us with a political strategy.
So you
That's
think
what Iran is doing.
so you think that's the same strategy Iran is going to be deploying,
Yeah,
but
it's still early days. We can't be
right, right,
100% sure, but this is the real issue. And you can already see it because both President Trump and J.D. Vance are terrified of a protracted war.
right,
Because
right.
this will split MAGA, and they're already in trouble for the midterms. And so President Trump wants to unify MAGA for the midterms. And so the idea that this would go on not just for a few days, but a few weeks and maybe months here. Well, this is manna from heaven for Iran. And it's true, they'll be paying a price. UAE might bomb them. This might be bad, but if you want to really score a big victory over Trump, you do it politically in the United States. That's his vulnerable underbelly.
Right.
It's
So
politics, not PGMs.
so what do you think the Trump administration could do in terms of both the war and in terms of public appearance? Because let's say you had Americans killed in Kuwait in the retaliation, right? That's a horrible image. Okay.
They've got to pick their poison,
Right.
Eduardo. So they're
So,
on the
so which
horns of a
poison do you think they're going
dilemma.
to pick? They're going to
Well,
double
it
down? Do you
depends.
think they're
Well,
going to pick,
this is going to be up to this is what the presidents get. They're the president. Okay. But the real dilemma here is you're already losing control. Okay. Nobody was expecting that they were going to go and attack Dubai. I mean, so this right
right,
off the bat. Okay.
right, the same day.
So
Yeah.
literally the same idea. And they've already sunk a tanker in the Straits of Hormuz. So they're already playing the long game right from the get-go. So this is really what the West Wing or the Mar-a-Lago group has to really be talking about right now if they're smart, and I do think they have smart people there, which is do you bite the bullet and you just sort of walk away now? You sort of do another, let's declare victory. Okay, all we really wanted was to kill the supreme leader. And, this would be like Maduro 2, you kind of walk
Right.
away and
Hmm.
let's go talk about attacking Greenland again. Okay. Or do you go down the longer road? And the problem here is this is not fully now in President Trump's control. This is really where the loss of control comes in, Eduardo. So when you say, what should America do? There were more options for America before we bombed Fordo, after
Right.
we bombed Fordo, than there
Few
are
days
right
ago. Yeah.
now. We
Mhm.
have crossed a threshold where the initiative now is really serious ways in Iran's hands. And
Hmm.
it's not going to become less in Iran's hands with killing another 100 or 200 or 500 leaders here, because what's going to happen is nationalism is going to congeal things even more. So this really is really quite a question here. Do you want to lose in the short term, or do you
Yeah.
want to lose in November?
Hmm.
That's what the real question here is for President Trump, because he's not coming there. There's no like, and that's why I think he's waffling all over the place. It's
Right. Of course.
because he's choosing between some pretty bad political options. I have no
Hmm.
idea why he went down this road. This never made any military or political sense. But the fact of the matter is, he is losing control of this every single day. If the UAE decides, which they do have aircraft, if they decide they want to bomb too and they want to get into this, there's no NATO here. This isn't like NATO
Not a coordinated strike
where
anymore.
we
Right.
run the other country's
Hmm.
military. See, NATO is not just an alliance, it's a warfighting alliance with an American general ordering the other country's air forces and militaries in terms of what they're going to do. That's not the way this looks in the Persian Gulf.
Right. And you talked about nationalism rising a few times now. That reminds me of the whole escalation we had in the 19s with supplying weapons and fighting on behalf of the Afghanis, and then of course the Gulf War, which of course drove nationalism in the Middle East, and which would led to the 9/11 attacks and the rise of terrorism from the Middle East. This is obviously a hard guess to make, but down 10, 15 years as we keep on encroaching the Middle East, which is something that the Trump administration came into power saying they wouldn't do. Do you expect that to bring the rise of a new wave of terrorism in America or in Western countries, or is that too far-fetched?
No, I wish it was far-fetched, Eduardo. The rise of terrorism is something that will probably take some time to congeal, and that frustrates American publics and really Western publics in general, because we like things to happen on our schedule. We want to plan our vacations around this.
Hmm.
The bottom line is those escalations happen on the other countries, the other groups' schedule, especially nationalism. So what you saw when we invaded Iraq, for example, March 2003, we invade Iraq, and it took 6 months before you saw the rise of suicide campaign inside of Iraq, and then a little bit longer before it wasn't until the summer of 2005 you had the London suicide bombings, which really scared everybody. It was March 2004, you had the Madrid bombings, which really scared everybody. So
Right.
those didn't happen on the next day, you see what I mean? But they happened as nationalism started to congeal. And it's like a super tanker nationalism. Once you congeal it, it goes on its own momentum. And that's why in Iraq, there was no terrorism to speak of in Iraq until we invaded the country. 6 months later, we started the largest anti-American terrorist campaign in modern times out of Iraq. And then even as we defeated AQI, the group that was the one running that, that planted the seeds for ISIS. So this went on, and
Right.
it's because the hornet's nest of terrorism is exactly coming from nationalism, and it's not over like a light switch. It's not, it's like a super tanker. It takes some time to get going. But man, if the Iranians have tons of networks inside the United States, so the FBI is right. to, Cash
Hmm.
Patel is right to be saying to the JTTFs, which I used to work with all the time, to be on high alert. The problem is they've got to stay on ultra high alert, cancel all vacations for the next 3 years.
Right.
Okay. Gaddafi, when we tried to kill Gaddafi with precision air power, the Reagan administration, that was April 1986. 2 years later, he blew up Pan Am Flight 103, killing 271, and that was 190 Americans in retaliation.
Right.
2 years later, you see, this is the problem here with this. This is won't happen
It's
quickly.
not short term. Yeah. But I guess the question that's been mostly on my mind in the mind of many, conservative
Yeah.
students is like, what does America have to gain with all this, right? Because it's it really bugs me. Like, why are we going back to the Middle East so often? Yes, there's the threat of Iran with nuclear weapons, but what's the risk reward ratio of striking down the leader of Iran and then perhaps, as you said, building up nationalism and terrorism around the world? So what does America have to gain with
So
all of
let me tell you, let's go back. Let me start answering this in 2005,
this? Okay.
because Dick Lugar, who's a big Republican here on Capitol Hill, it's one of our big senators. He brought me to a big senator's lunch, and he wanted to know, okay, Professor Pape, you've explained how we got here in this mess. How do we actually get out of this? And I
Hmm.
said, you have energy independence. You end up producing more oil in the United States than you need from the Persian Gulf. And that is a way to actually really start to, cut the Gordian knot. We've done that, Eduardo.
Right.
So yes, it's true. 20% of the world's oil comes out of through the Persian Gulf today, but it used to be 30 and 40% before we came back online as the world's gas station. So
Hmm.
number one, your question is even more true than you might even realize because we
Right.
have taken steps, and it's conservatives who took those steps to become more secure as a country. Second thing is, you've got to just see President Xi has got to be smiling, and Putin's got to be smiling here. Oh my goodness gracious, they probably can't wait for America to get stuck in a quagmire with Iran. And then on top of that, to legitimate and set precedents where now President Xi can just point to good old President Trump when he starts assassinating leaders in Taipei. Here, I mean, this is
Right.
like manna from
Yeah.
heaven for them. This is just this is perfect because what you want to do with your adversary is you want to tie them in knots. You want to get them tied down in other secondary fronts so that you have a wide open lane. And that's what's happening. And I've been warning about this pretty much since President Trump has come into office, that he's making China great, not again, but he's making China number one. And it's almost like they're on the China payroll. I mean, my goodness, they couldn't ask for a
Right.
better, a
Exactly. Yeah.
better American president than President Trump. President Xi has got to have the biggest smiles on his face ever.
Hmm. So how do you expect that, China and Russia to react to this in terms of their posture
Oh, I
towards
think they're
America?
going to want to stay out of it as much as possible. They're going to want to kind of do a quiet amount of subtle support here, a little bit here, a little bit there for Iran. They don't want Iran to go down quick. But at the same time, they don't have to do too much because we apparently can't stay out of forever wars. I mean, we've just tried so hard to get out of two forever wars, and
Hmm.
we're just itching, I guess, to get back into
But
another one. We
why
can't
did
seem to
we
find
even
a
do it then? Why did we even do it?
look. I've advised every White House since 9/11. I'd be glad to advise this West Wing here if I were asked. I've said that before. I'll say it again. But the truth is, and then if I did, I couldn't tell you, of course. But still, I haven't. I haven't done. I mean, I couldn't tell you
Right.
the details.
Right.
But what I mean is that I don't really know. And having done this, advised Chief Staff of the Air Force, Chief Staff of the Navy, helped design bombing targets for Bosnia, had been to stop the Bosnian Civil War. Having again every White House since 9/11 here. I know enough to know that I don't really know fully. So this whole idea, we're going to guess what is going on inside of President Trump's decision making. I think this is really quite a fool's errand. And what we can do is not make, sort of like guesses here. We can make assessments. So rather than try to say this is what driving President Trump, it's Israel or something else. I really don't know. I think what we do is we assess and we explain, we offer frameworks.
So you mentioned Israel in the in that answer, and of course the strike was coordinated between the two countries,
Yeah, that's pretty clear.
Israel and Israel. Yeah. Um, how much do you think the relationship between the U.S. and Israel did we do it because of Israel, or how much of a play did
Again,
Israel
I
have to
don't
do?
think
Do
we
you have
can answer
no
it that way because I'm not going to answer it with intention. What I can tell you is
right?
that Israel has its own self-interest in having its own manifest destiny and basically taking over from the Nile to the Euphrates. That would be its version of manifest destiny. Now, the
Mhm.
Euphrates is all the way over in the middle of Iraq. Okay.
Right.
So that's pretty far. But notice it took us 100 years to do manifest destiny in the United States. So this idea that we would talk this way. So I do think that Israel probably thinks along these lines. At least some of their leaders seem to think that way. I think that it's a very different world. When we were basically manifest destiny across the North American continent, we did not have major countries and possibility of air forces and nuclear weapons and terrorism and so forth. So I don't really think that it's smart even for Israel to try this more expansive strategy.
Mhm.
And so I would advise Israel to have a more limited approach. They're not having a limited approach. They're trying to break every country in the region. They broke Syria. They were happy we broke Iraq. They're happy that we helped break Libya. So if you look at the countries here that they have seen as their enemies, they have been broken. Now there's still Saudi Arabia that needs to be broken. So they're not going to be happy if Saudi Arabia gets stronger, and they're certainly not going to be happy if Saudi Arabia gets nuclear weapons. So they would need to break Saudi Arabia. They would need to break Turkey and Iran, but Iran is next in the crosshairs. So first you would break Iran and have that break into pieces. Then you would probably focus on Saudi Arabia, and then you would probably focus on Turkey, something like that order. But that's Israel's grand strategy, which I think is a mistake, as I've said, but I do see them moving in that direction. Why America would be involved with this, it just doesn't make much sense to me because we just have bigger fish to fry. We should be doing everything to modernize our, as you've heard me other times in other ways, we haven't talked about China and AI and so
Right.
forth. But we have a whole set of missions we could be doing here to stay number one. And that's my goal. I'd like America to be the number one most powerful country on the planet. And I actually may live to see us being replaced by China.
And I don't want to, go overly long here. This has been incredibly helpful. But I do have a final question. You say you wanted to see America be number one, and you talked
Yeah.
multiple times here about American primacy in other interviews that we've done before. How do you see America playing this card in the next, 2, 3 months? Or what framework you said it's really hard to predict. So what type of framework do you think they're going to be
Well, what I
using
think is
for the next few
happening,
months?
Eduardo, and I have a big book coming out in the fall on American political violence. It's coming out in September.
Right.
I think what's happening is we are feeling the curveball of American political violence with all the issues that are happening there, and that is causing disruption in our international policy. So I don't think and this is why the conversations, is Trump a realist? Is it spheres of influence? I think that we all know they don't have a whole lot of sticky reality, but there's a a reason. It's not just Trump being mercurial. It's because we're going through other things as a country that are domestic. These are these big social changes. And when the book comes out here, maybe you want to talk about it here. And it would also bear directly on this. Like, why would these international policies be emerging and why would they appear to be chaotic? I think a lot of it has to do with MAGA politics and politics in general in the era of what I call violent populism. This is
Right.
a little different
But
than
in
we've
terms,
talked, but this is what's underneath it and why you
Mhm.
can't solve it with just the international discussion.
Right. But in terms of the American military, how do you think we're going to be moving forward the next few months? You think we're going to double down and just be, hey, we're going to completely topple the regime and, support Pahlavi or whoever's,
I think it's going to be pretty hard to stay focused on international issues when you just saw us coming out of Operation Midway Blitz in Chicago and Metro Blitz in Minneapolis. President Trump's already talking about taking over voting in a number of places domestically. He's already told the U.S. military on September 30th. That is the 800 generals that he brought in an unprecedented meeting. Never happened before since 1947 when we created the Defense Department, now Department of War. That
Mhm.
they had to be prepared to use American liberal cities as test beds. He specifically talked about Chicago and specifically talked about liberal cities in that speech. We are going through, this isn't just a mercurial Trump. This is why I say, and so I don't believe we have the staying power for a protracted war. And
Right.
I think this is so Iran's strategy, the protracted war I just talked about, that's always been the best strategy for the weak.
Hmm.
Now, it may be the silver bullet for them because this really is going to be a problem for us. It's going to be extremely difficult for President Trump to stay focused on Iran for 2 months
Hmm.
here. I find this very, very unlikely. And what that means is that Iran may well accelerate to a nuclear weapon right under his nose.
Right.
This
Interesting.
this is what they need to hear. They need to
So we
hear
basically
these
bombed it. We
realities.
don't have the capacity to take care of it for too long, so we're just going to leave it there as it is and
Well,
then
what is
let
he
it melt,
really going to do?
basically.
How is he actually going to
Right, right.
solve the problem? And I
Hmm.
think that what he's doing right now is hoping to win, and he's trying a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But the problem is he's going through now the stages of the smart bomb trap. He's already been through stage one now. Now he's going through stage two, which is a threshold that pulls you deeper. And that
So
is
it
what
wasn't
he's
the quick victory he was expecting.
no, right. He declared
Mhm.
quick victory. Okay, got away with that. That was stage one. But you go back for regime change stage two. Now you've unleashed a lot of problems here. And what does happen if Iran brings down an airplane out of Chicago and out of O'Hare? Shoulder-fired missiles here. We
Hmm.
need to understand. Iran has a giant embassy in Mexico City. They've got a lot of connections with those drug runners. That means that there's going to be a lot of cargo
Right.
containers. Okay, so we only inspect less than 1% of all those container ships. This is not that difficult for Stinger missiles to come in. Now, I'm not trying to be, super scary here, but nonetheless, remember what I said. Countries and leaders and regimes, they don't like it when you start assassinating their leaders and they start saying, well,
Right.
why aren't we fighting back?
Hmm. Oh, perfect. Well, Professor, thank you so much for your time. That was really interesting. And I hope, the listeners got a lot
Well,
of
I
good
look
information to
forward
think
to the
about.
feedback again. We had a lot of great
Right.
feedback here the last
Right.
time. It was really something,
No,
Eduardo.
great time.
You're
Yeah.
building
Always
a
great
great
talking to you,
thing.
Professor. Well, thank
Okay.
you for listening, and we'll be back for more soon. Thank you.
Okay, absolutely.
Yeah.